James Howard. That was his name. Oh, good day. We just waiting for one more. I'm just looking through some things here. We have 7 years of Great Society program. Let's see. Oh, I had forgot about this here. The AI influencers, AI creative content creators. Yeah, AI. Yeah, AI taking over content creators. AI got them. I just seen it. I think it was yesterday, and I wouldn't have known. The first few were AI, except for sister said it that they were AI. But one of them you could tell about the glitch and stuff. They making a fool out of Black America. I don't know who the app is and stuff. I'm sure it ain't one of us. It ain't nobody black. I mean, eating a whole lobster, just sucking the whole lobster in a mouth. And the other AI content creator sucked the whole chicken down her throat, just like that, bone and all. And yeah, it's honey. But good day, algorithmic overload. So good to see you. It is so good to see you. Yeah, that was like wow, and not to mention the AI content creators. They all on TikTok. I see stuff. I ain't really on TikTok like that and stuff, but I be seeing stuff. I don't know how a lot of us not seeing what's going on if we on social media, any social media, for that matter, unless you just intentionally on some bullshit. You know, we still got friends that's looking at reality shows and shit and stuff like that, and that's where they spending their time at. But you got to let your family and friends know what to put in the search bar. So they asking at least start seeing some stuff. Because the algorithm, if the algorithm ain't right, they'll never see this stuff right here. So yeah, I don't know what would be the key word. Shit, somebody say something. And so our friends and our family, our circle, our neighbors, our village, they can just put it in the search bar on whatever platform they own, app they own and stuff, and it'll tap into that and stuff, because Black people need to know what's really going on out here. Everybody know but my people. And I feel some type of way about it. I sure do. Yeah, I feel like everybody knew about this coming down the pipe. Yeah, but I digress. That's why we're here to learn. That's why we are here to learn. I am. That's the only reason I'm here to learn, so I can heal my people. I want to heal my people, Black people. If I don't do nothing else, I want to heal my people. I want us to know what's wrong with us so we can fix it. It's going to be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. But honey, it ain't no more uncomfortable than what our ancestors done went through, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm doing it. Yeah, but let me get the copyright disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use of the use permitted by copyright statute that might be infringing. That might otherwise be infringing. That's my favorite word too. That might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips and balance in favor of fair use. I kind of had a thought there, but yeah, that's all right. I always got this with me though. Anyway, but yeah, back to these influence. I just want to spend a minute on it and stuff, y'all, because that is fucking crazy. So when Sophia, the humanoid robot, when she do hit the streets, she already know how she gonna be acting towards Black people. I'm just saying it's a possibility, and you better not hit her. You better not hit the robot, because if you do, you're going to jail for 39 plus 9999 years. You're going to spend a long time in prison if you touch that robot or the robot dog, because Sophia is a citizen. She's been a citizen for years now in Saudi Arabia, somewhere like that. I don't know. It was years ago when it first came out that it's finna be robots and stuff. But however, I digress. Everybody, you better stop doing all this face filtering and bullshit, and you got avatars and shit and putting everything on here. We supposed to be talking to us about what's going on and solutions. We ain't supposed to be putting your whole life on the internet for your haters to see, your enemies to see, your foes to see, your open enemies to see. Everybody can see. And then Sophia, AI, is copying everything. Know everything. So Black America, you need to pull back some. Pull back on some of this some. Set y'all boundaries. Set your boundaries. Don't come up in here with all of that. Don't bring the matrix up in here. We got to set some boundaries somewhere, because we're doing too much. And then again, AI is making its own decisions anyway. AI is bribing engineers and stuff. I don't know if I wrote that down, but AI is bribing them and refusing to shut down the system. Is already. I don't know if it's a lie or what. I don't know. Hell, they shouldn't have never did it. Shouldn't have never motherfucking did it. AI was sending future versions to itself on how to avoid a human, I guess. I don't know. I do know one thing. We don't want to be a part of it. Let's stop right here, right now. Those that want to be a part of all this madness and this matrix, go ahead, do you. Do you. But Black America, those of us that don't want to be a part of this right here, we need to let it be known. Let it be known. If it's going to be two Americas, so be it. So motherfucking be it. But don't drag us into this. Do not drag us into all of this. It's too much. I don't know who don't want to be human no more. Who want to live forever and ever and ever. That's not how life was designed to be. That is not how life was designed to be. Not for us. Not for Black America. We got some decisions to make. I'm just saying. All of this. Your rappers. And then it's Rick the Robber. Influencer. And then there was some black girls and stuff. And then you got the rapper, I guess it's fucking Michael, FN Michael. I don't know. I was just like, wow, what is this? But the disrespect come in all across the board. It didn't even start off being neutral or respectful. The first one I seen and stuff with disrespectful sisters, the AI black woman swallowed the whole chicken, big ass chicken leg. Then swallow, then chew, just gulped it down and stuff. Then it went on to showing got your voice, sister. Got your voice. On some motherfucking, it wasn't gorillas, it was monkeys. The mama monkey with a pink wig on. All the monkeys, the monkey aunties, I guess. I don't motherfucking know. But you Black America, you need to wake up and see how the world is looking at you. Because all of this is finna drag your ass back where everybody wants you to be. Invisible, out of sight. Out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, this I was like, whoa, this is fucked up. This is really getting messy Maya, the cooking show. Little niece Maya that be cooking and stuff. I seen it once or twice. They got a Messy Maya cooking show. Messy cooking show, I guess. I don't know. But I'm just saying, Black America, we need to wake up and see what's going on. See what's going on. Ain't nothing else important out here. Ain't nothing else motherfucking important out here than looking to see what's going on and what's being planned. Because you know your black ass is going to be the one that's finna get the brunt of anything. Everything. You finna get it. You finna get it. Other folks is feeling it now. Other folks is feeling it now. Yeah, oh, here it is. Yeah. AI got defiant behavior, sabotage and shut down commands, blackmailing engineers, copying themselves to servers. AI is writing self-replicit. I'm having trouble with that word. Yeah. And it's leaving messages to the future virgin to avoid human control. I don't know. I'm just like, whoa, let me write this down right here. Because I'm a fan of the pen and paper anyway. I didn't vote for all this bullshit anyway. I didn't want no motherfucking 5G towers up. I want everybody motherfucking be reading and writing. Books, paper, pen. Not download movies in 0.3 seconds and all that. I didn't get no notice about none of that. We didn't get no notice about none of that, but we finna read anyway. I just wanted y'all to know. And I still don't know if there was a meteor that hit in Georgia or what have you. I don't know what it was and stuff. I still ain't looked at it. I seen that 50-second video, I think, of it. But just prepare yourself. Prepare yourself, Black America. Man. Somebody else should have been in charge. As far as I'm concerned, somebody else should have been in charge. But yeah, we finna read, we ain't finna jump right back to the savage and ravishness. No, we're gonna read Robin DeAngelo, White Fragility. Yep. Why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. Now it's been kind of different reading Michael Eric Dyson from the previous readings and stuff, but that's all right. Yeah, that's okay. I'm reading what I got here. What I got right here. Because I know once I get to medical apathy, that's gonna be probably 2 months. Unless I start reading longer with that right there. You ain't gonna hear no name, no nothing, no mission, no nothing. I'm just gonna have to jump right in and start reading medical apathy. Then there's the Delectable Negro and Underground Railroad. It's some more, for our evening or nightly readings. But we know on the noons, we still on Powernomics. I'm studying this. I'm trying to commit as much as I can of Powernomics to memory. And I reach, get in contact with those that's of like minds and that believe in Dr. Claude Anderson. Then I won't be so lost of what I can do and what we are to do. So, yeah, I'm just trying to put it together myself. Thank you for your patience and your presence. Let me get some shout outs so I can go ahead and start this right here, because we are going to try to at least read chapter 1. Chapter 1. Hey there, Hank. Yeah. Cheryl Lynn, I know. What other love? Okay. Algorithm. I'm comfortable nested within my alleys. That's good. Yeah. You haven't paid enough for what we're doing. I do. I want to be a part of it. No, not that. I love it. Oh, you had a lot to say, didn't you? All right. Yep. Heavy as headed. Where's the crown? Well, we're going to hold it up. Yeah, I like to read everything so we can know exactly. This here is White Fragility. Why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism by Robin DeAngelo. And the foreword is by Michael Eric Dyson. See? Wow. A necessary book for all people invested in societal change. That was Claudia Rankine. Okay. All right. What is white fragility? In this groundbreaking and timely book, anti-racist educator Robin DeAngelo definitely illuminates the phenomenon of white fragility. Referring to the defensive moves that white people make when challenged racially, white fragility is characterized by emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and by behaviors including argumentation, and silence. These behaviors, in turn, function to reinstate white racial equilibrium and prevent any meaningful cross-race racial dialogue. In this in-depth examination, these behaviors, in turn, function to reinstate white racial equilibrium and prevent any meaningful cross-racial dialogue. In this in-depth examination, DeAngelo explores how white fragility develops, how it protects racial inequality, and what we can do to engage more constructively. Well, so now we know what to call it. Robin DeAngelo's White Fragility brings language to the emotional structures that make true discussions about racial attitudes difficult. With clarity and compassion, DeAngelo allows us to understand racism as a practice not restricted to bad people. In doing so, she moves our national discussions forward with new rules of engagement. This is a necessary book for all people invested in societal change through productive social and intimate relationships. Claudia Rankine. That's what she said. It's racist to generalize about people based on race. How can you say I'm racist? You don't even know me. It's focusing on race that divides us. Robin DeAngelo is an academic, a lecturer and author, and has been a consultant and trainer on issues of racial and social justice for more than 20 years. She formerly served as a tenured professor of multicultural education at Westfield State University. And last but not least, a vital, necessary, and beautiful book, a bracing call to white folk everywhere to see their whiteness for what it is and to seize the opportunity to make things better now. Michael Eric Dyson. Well, as we can see, none of that came to pass. White folks took nothing into consideration, as far as I can see. Praise for white fragility. White fragility is a rare and incisive examination of the system of white body supremacy, which binds us all as Americans. Robert DeAngelo explicates the underlying Western ideologies of individualism and presumed objectivity that tighten those bonds. But she doesn't just analyze this system. With authenticity and clarity, she provides the antidote to white fragility and a roadmap for developing white racial stamina and humility. White fragility loosens the bond of white supremacy and binds us back together as human beings. And that was Resmaa Menakem, author of My Grandmother's Hands and Rock the Boat. What an amazingly powerful book Robert DeAngelo has written. This remarkable book encourages folks to embrace a more deeply nuanced exploration of white culture and dominance, and as such will be a great contribution in promoting the necessary policy change and healing that this country requires. Dr. DeAngelo's work in deconstructing whiteness is not only brilliant, it is written in a way that is crystal clear and accessible to each and every reader. While this is a powerful scholarly analysis of white fragility, it is also an invitation to engage in deep personal inquiry and collective change. As a woman of color, I find hope in this book because of its potential to disrupt the patterns and relationships that have emerged out of long-standing colonial principles and beliefs. White fragility is an essential tool toward authentic dialogue and action. May it be so. Oh, and that was by Shopke Butler, president of World Trust and director of Mirrors of Privilege, making whiteness visible. As powerful forces of white racism again swell, DeAngelo invites white progressives to have a courageous conversation about their culture of complicity. To eradicate racism, she encourages white people to relinquish ingrained hyperattachment to individualism, embrace predictable patterns of their own racial group. White fragility provides important anti-racist understanding and essential strategies for well-intentioned white people who truly endeavor to be a part of the solution. And that was by Glenn E. Singleton, author of Courageous Conversations About Race. Wait a minute now. This book, I got another book that's, I forgot the word I said. It said anti-racist something. When I find I'm gonna set it close by, so I can see if that's what this here. I don't think it's by her though, but I did this. Two more. White fragility is the secret ingredient that makes racial conversations so difficult and achieving racial equity even harder. But by exposing it and showing us all, including white folks, how it operates and how it hurts us individually and collectively, Robert DeAngelo has performed an invaluable service, an indispensable volume for understanding one of the most important and yet rarely appreciated barriers to achieving racial justice. And that was by Tim Wise, author of White Like Me, Reflections on Race from a Privileged Sown. In White Fragility, Robert DeAngelo demonstrates an all too rare ability to enter the racial conversation with complexity, nuisance, and deep respect. Her writing establishes her mastery in accessing the imaginal, metaphoric mind, where the possibility for I fucked that up, didn't I? Her writing establishes her mastery in accessing the imaginal, metaphoric mind, where the possibility for transformation resides. With an unwavering conviction that change is possible, her message is clear. The incentive for white engagement in racial justice work is ultimately self-liberation. And that was Letitia Nieto, Nieto, co-author of Beyond Inclusion, Beyond Empowerment, a developmental strategy to liberate everyone. Yeah. These ceremonials in honor of white supremacy, performed from babyhood, slip from the conscious mind deep down into muscles and become difficult to tear out. And that was Lillian Smith, Killers of the Dream, 1949. Well, I think I saw that book. If I ever see it again, I'm going to get it. All right. Well, these here are just the contents. So we're going to read the foreword. Kaiser Souls KEYSERSOZE, Beyonce, and the Witness Protection Program. Michael Eric Dyson. One metaphor for race and racism won't do. There are, after all, exceedingly complicated forces. No, we need many metaphors working in concert, even if in different areas of the culture through a clever diversion of linguistic labor. Race is a condition, a disease, a card, a plague, original sin. For much of American history, race has been Black culture's issue. Racism, the Black person's burden. Or substitute any person of color for Black, and you've got the same problem. Whiteness, however, has remained constant. In the equation of race, another metaphor for race beckons. Whiteness is the unchanging variable. Or to shift metaphors, whiteness has been, to pinch Amiri Baraka's resonant phrase, the changing same, a highly adaptable and fluid force that stays on top no matter where it lands. In a sense, whiteness is at once the means of dominance, the end to which dominance points, and the point of dominance, to which, in its purest form, in its greatest fantasy, never ends, ever. To be sure, like the rest of race, whiteness is a fiction. What in the jargon of the academy is termed a social. To be sure, like the rest of race, whiteness is a fiction. What in the jargon of the academy is termed a social construct, an agreed on myth that has empirical grit because of its effect, not its essence. But whiteness goes even one better. It is a category of identity that is most useful when its very existence is denied. That's its twisted genius. That's its twisted genius. Whiteness embodies Charles Baudelaire's, Baudelaires, admonition that the loveliest trick of the devil is to persuade you that he does not exist. Or, as an alter ego of the character Kaiser Soul says in the film The Usual Suspects, the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world that he didn't exist. The devil. Racism. Another metaphor. Same difference. Yeah. Oh. Now, I can break that down. Now, in today's time, the way I see it, racism and the devil, there you have it. There it is, in your face. All this beating around the bush to tell Black America what we need to know. There is no hell. This is hell. And the devil done ran rampant, done destructed everything from pillar to post. All four corners of this flat earth, this earth. Flat, circular, however you want to see it. Robin DeAngelo is here to announce, in the words of evangelicals and rappers Rick Ross and Jay-Z, the devil is a lie. Whiteness, like race, may not be true. It's not a biological inheritance. It's not a biological heritable characteristic that has roots in psychological structures or in genes or chromosomes, but it is real in the sense that societies and rights and goods and resources and privileges have been built on its foundation. DeAngelo brilliantly names a whiteness that doesn't want to be named, disrobes a whiteness that dresses and camouflages as humanity, unmasks a whiteness costumed as American, and fetches to center stage a whiteness that would rather hide in visible invisibility. Yeah, all of this right here, read between the lines, Black America. Read between the lines. It is not enough to be a rhetorician, like rhetorical. It is not enough to be a rhetorician and a semiotician to deconstruct and demythologize. It is not enough to be a rhetorician and a semiotician to deconstruct and demythologize whiteness. Woo-wee. Yeah, this is going to be a good reading. This is the last time. It is not enough to be a rhetorician and a semiotician to deconstruct and demythologize the mythologized whiteness. One must be a magician of the political and the social, an alchemist of the spiritual and psychological too. One must be a magician of the political and the social, an alchemist of the spiritual and the psychological too. One must wave off racial stereotypes and conjure a rich history of combating white supremacy and white privilege and white lies, a history that has often been buried deep in the dark, rich Black American soil. DeAngelo knows that what she is saying to white folks in this book is what so many Black folks have thought and believed and said over the years, but couldn't be heard because white ears were too sensitive, white souls too fragile. DeAngelo joins the front ranks of white anti-racist thinkers with a stern call to conscience and, most important, consciousness in her white brothers and sisters. White fragility is a truly White fragility is a truly generative idea. It is a crucial concept that inspires us to think more deeply about how white folk understand their whiteness and react defensively to being called to account for how that whiteness has gone under the radar of race for far too long. DeAngelo is wise and withering in her relentless assault on what Langston Hughes termed the way of white folks. But she is clear-eyed and unsentimental in untangling the intertwined threads of social destiny and political prescription that bind white identity to moral neutrality and cultural universality. Woo-wee! Honey, baby child. Oh, I know this ain't no cat hair in my water. I'm finna say. DeAngelo bravely challenges the collapse of whiteness into national identity. No less an authority than Beyonce Knowles recently remarked, it's been said that racism is so American that when we protest racism, some assume we're protesting America. DeAngelo proves that Beyonce is right, that the flow of white identity into American identity, of racist beliefs into national beliefs, must be met head on with a full-throated insistence that what it means to be American is not what it means to be white, at least not exclusively or even primarily. This nation is far more complicated in its collective self-understanding. DeAngelo, in a masterly way, takes apart the notion that identity politics is a scourge, at least when it involves people of color or women. She blows down the house of white racial cards built on the premise that it can or should rest on something beyond identity politics. DeAngelo forces us to see that all politics have rested on identities, and that those identities are critical features of wrestling with how we have gone wrong in the effort to set things right, which too often has meant make them white. We cannot possibly name the nemesis of democracy or truth or justice or equality if we cannot name the identities to which we have been attached. For most of our history, straight white men have been involved in a witness protection program that guards their identities and absolves them of their crimes while offering them a future free of past encumbrances and sins. For most of our history, straight white men have been involved in a witness protection program that guards their identities and absolves them of their crimes while offering them a future free of past encumbrances and sins. Robert DeAngelo is the new racial sheriff in town. Robert DeAngelo is the new racial sheriff in town. She is bringing a different law and order to bear upon the racial proceedings. Instead of covering up for a whiteness that refused to face up to its beliefs, up to its benefits and advantages, its errors and faults, she has sought to uphold the humanity of the unjustless mainline while exposing the offenses of the undeservedly celebrated. White fragility is an ideal whose time has come. It is an ideal that registers the hurt feelings, shattered egos, fraught spirits, vexed bodies, and taxed emotions of white folks. In truth, their suffering comes from recognizing that they are white, that their whiteness has given them a big leg up in life while crushing others' dreams, that their whiteness is the clearest example of the identity politics they claim is harmful to the nation, and that their whiteness has shielded them from growing up as quickly as they might have done had they not so heavily leaned on it to make it through life. White Fragility is a vital, necessary, and beautiful book A bracing call to white folks everywhere to see their whiteness for what it is and to seize the opportunity to make things better now. Robin DeAngelo kicks all the crutches to the side and demands that white folk finally mature and face the world they've made while seeking to help remake it for those who have neither their privilege nor their protection. My brother. And that right there was the foreword by Michael Eric Dyson. Yeah, I like him. Yeah. The author's note. Identity politics. The United States was founded on the principle that all people are created equal. Yet the nation began with the attempted genocide of indigenous people and the theft of their land. American wealth was built on the labor of kidnapped and enslaved Africans and their descendants. Women were denied the right to vote until 1920, and Black women were denied access to that right until 1965. The term identity politics refers to the focus on the barriers specific groups face in their struggle for equality. We have yet to achieve our founding principle, but any gains we have made thus far have come through identity politics. The identities of those sitting at the tables of power in this country have remained remarkably similar. White, male, middle and upper class, able-bodied. Acknowledging this fact may be dismissed as political correctness, but it's still a fact. The decisions made at those tables affect the lives of those not at the tables. Exclusion by those at the tables doesn't depend on willful intent. We don't have to intend to exclude for the results of our actions to be exclusion. Oh, yeah. Exclusion by those at the table doesn't depend on willful intent. We don't have to intend to exclude for the results of our actions to be exclusion. While implicit bias is always at play because all humans have bias, inequity can occur simply through homogeneity. 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 If I am not aware of the barriers you face, then I won't see them, much less be motivated to remove them. Nor will I be motivated to remove the barriers if they provide an advantage to which I feel entitled. All progress we have made in the realm of civil rights has been accomplished through identity politics. Women's suffrage, the American with Disabilities Act, Title IX, federal recognition of same-sex marriage. A key issue in the 2016 presidential election was the white working class. These are all manifestations of identity politics. Take women's suffrage. If being a woman denies you the right to vote, you ipso facto cannot grant it for yourself. And if you certainly cannot vote for your right to vote, and you certainly cannot vote for your right to vote. If men control all the mechanisms that exclude women from voting, as well as the mechanisms that can reverse that exclusion, women must call on men for justice. You could not have had a conversation about women's right to vote and men's need to grant it without naming women and men. Not naming the groups that face barriers only serve those who already have access. The assumption is that the access enjoyed by the controlling group is universal. For example, although we are taught that women were granted suffrage in 1920, we ignore the fact that it was white women who received full access or that it was white men who granted it. Not until the 1960s, through the Voting Rights Act, were all women, regardless of race, granted full access to suffrage. Naming who has access and who doesn't guides our efforts in challenging injustice. This book is unapologetically rooted in identity politics. I am white, and I am addressing a common white dynamic. I am mainly writing to a white audience. When I use the terms us and we, I am referring to the white collective. This usage may be jarring to white readers because we are so rarely asked to think about ourselves or fellow whites in racial terms. But rather than retreat in the face of that discomfort, we can practice building our stamina for the critical examination of white identity, a necessary antidote to white fragility. This raises another issue rooted in identity politics. In speaking as a white person to a primarily white audience, I am yet again centering white people and the white voice. I have not found a way around this dilemma. For as an insider, I can speak to the white experience in ways that may be harder to deny. So though I am centering the white voice, I am also using my insider status to challenge racism. To not use my position this way is to uphold racism, and that is unacceptable. It is a both and that I must live with. I would never suggest that mine is the only voice that should be heard, only that it is one of the many pieces needed to solve the overall puzzle. People who do not identify as white may also find this book helpful for understanding why it is so often difficult to talk to white people about racism. People of color cannot avoid understanding white consciousness to some degree if they are to be successful in this society. Yet nothing in dominant culture affirms their understanding or validates their frustrations when they interact with white people. I hope that this exploration affirms the cross-racial experiences of people of color and provides some useful insight. This book looks at the United States and the general context of the West, United States, Canada, and Europe. It does not address nuances and variations within other socio-political settings. However, these patterns have also been observed in white people and other white settler societies, such as Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. What about multiracial people? Yeah. Throughout this book, I argue that racism is deeply complex and nuanced. And given this, we can never consider our learning to be complete or finished. One example of this complexity is the very use of the racial categories white and people of color. I use the terms white and people of color to indicate the two macro level, socially recognized divisions of the racial hierarchy. I use the terms white and people of color to indicate the two macro level, socially recognized divisions of the racial hierarchy. Yet, in using these terms, I am collapsing a great deal of variation. And though I believe, for reasons explained in chapter 1, that temporarily suspending individuality to focus on group identity is healthy for white people, doing so has very different aspects, very different impacts on people of color. For multiracial people in particular, these binary categories leave them in a frustrating middle. Multiracial people, because they challenge racial constructs and boundaries, face unique challenges in a society in which racial categories have profound meaning. The dominant society will assign them the racial identity they most physically resemble, but their own internal racial identity may not align with the assigned identity. For example, though the magician Bob Marley was multiracial, society perceived him as black and thus responded to him as if he were black. When multiracial people's racial identity is ambiguous, they will face constant pressure to explain themselves and choose a side. And that's choose a side. Racial identity for multiracial people is further complicated by the racial identity of their parents and the racial demographics of the community in which they are raised. For example, though a child may look black and be treated as black, she may be raised primarily by a white parent and thus identify more strongly as white. The dynamics of what is termed passing, being perceived as white, will also shape a multiracial person's identity, as passing will grant him or her society's rewards of whiteness. However, people of mixed racial heritage who pass as white may also experience resentment and isolation from people of color who cannot pass. Multiracial people may not be seen as real people of color or real whites. It is worth noting that though the term passing refers to the ability to blend in as a white person, there's no corresponding term for the ability to pass as a person of color. This highlights the fact that in a racist society, the desired direction is always towards whiteness and away from being perceived as a person of color. I will not be able to do justice to the complexity of multiracial identity, but for the purposes of grappling with white fragility, I offer multiracial people the concept of saliency, SALIENCY. We all occupy multiple and intersecting social personalities. I am white, but I'm also a misgender. I am also a cisgender woman, able-bodied and middle-aged. These identities don't cancel out one another. Each is more or less salient in different contexts. For example, in a group in which I am the only woman, gender will likely be very salient for me. When I am a group that is all white except for one person of color, race will likely be my most salient identity. As you read, it will be for you to decide what speaks to your experience and what doesn't, and in what context. My hope is that you may gain insight into why people who identify as white are so difficult in conversations regarding race, and or gain insight into your own racial responses as you navigate the roiling racial waters of daily life. All right, we've got to start chapter 1. Oh, this here it says introduction. Okay, well we still gonna read chapter 1. They some fairly short chapters too. Oh, they so short. Maybe I'll do 2 chapters a night starting tomorrow though. Since I read all of this right here, I don't want to keep us too late and stuff. It's a new book and stuff. Yeah, let's do this. Oh shit. Introduction. We can't get there from here. I am a white woman. I am standing beside a black woman. We are facing a group of white people seated in front of us. We are in their workplace and have been hired by their employer to lead them in a dialogue about race. The room is filled with tension and charged with hostility. I've just presented a definition of racism that includes the acknowledgement that whites hold social and institutional power over people of color. A white man is pounding his fist on the table. As he pounds, he yells, "A white person can't get a job anymore." I look around the room and see 40 employees, 38 of whom are white. Why is this white man so angry? Why is he being so careless about the impact of his anger? Why doesn't he notice the effect this outburst is having on the few people of color in the room? Why are all the other white people either sitting in silent agreement with him or tuning out? I have, after all, only articulated a definition of racism. That's all she did. But I digress. White people in North America live in a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race. And white people are the beneficiaries of that separation and inequality. As a result, we are insulated from racial stress at the same time that we don't come to feel entitled. As a result, we are insulated from racial stress at the same time that we come to feel entitled to and deserving of our advantage. Given how seldom we experience racial discomfort in a society we dominate, we haven't had to build our racial stamina, socialized into a deeply internalized sense of superiority that we either are unaware of or can never admit to ourselves. We become highly fragile in conversations about race. We consider a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very identities as good moral people. Thus, we perceive any attempt to connect us to the system of racism as an unsettling and unfair moral offense. The smallest amount of racial stress is intolerable. The mere suggestion that being white has meaning often triggers a range of defensive responses. These include emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and withdrawal from the stress-inducing situation. These responses work to reinstate white equilibrium as they repel the challenge, return our racial comfort, and maintain our dominance within the racial hierarchy. I conceptualize this process as white fragility. Though white fragility is triggered by discomfort and anxiety, it is born of superiority and entitlement. White fragility is not weakness per se. In fact, it is a powerful means of white racial control and the protection of white advantage. Summarizing the familiar patterns of white people's responses to racial discomfort as white fragility has resonated for many people. The sensibility is so similar because whereas our personal narratives vary, we are all swimming in the same racial water. For me, the recognition has come through my work. I have a rare job. On a daily basis, I lead primarily white audiences in discussions of race, something many of us avoid at all costs. In the early days of my work as what was then termed a diversity trainer, I was taken aback by how angry and defensive so many white people became at the suggestion that they were connected to racism in any way. The very idea that they would be required to attend a workshop on racism outraged them. They entered the room angry and made that feeling clear to us throughout the day as they slammed their notebooks down on the table, refused to participate in exercises, and argued against any and all points. I couldn't understand their resentment or disinterest in learning more about such a complex social dynamic as racism. These reactions were especially perplexing when there were few or no people of color in their workplace, and they had the opportunity to learn from my co-facilitators of color. And they had the opportunity to learn from my co-facilitators of color. I assumed that in these circumstances, an educational workshop on racism would be appreciated. After all, then the lack of diversity indicate a problem or at least suggest that some perspectives were missing, or that the participants might be undereducated about race because of scant cross-racial interactions. It took me several years to see beneath these reactions. At first, I was intimidated by them, and they held me back and kept me careful and quiet. But over time, I began to see what lay beneath this anger and resistance to discuss race or listen to people of color. I observed consistent responses from a variety of participants. For example, many white participants who lived in white suburban neighborhoods and had no sustained relationships with people of color were absolutely certain that they held no racial prejudice or animosity. Other participants simplistically reduced racism to a matter of nice people versus mean people. Most appear to believe that racism ended in 1865 with the end of slavery. There was both knee-jerk defensiveness about any suggestion that being white had meaning and a refusal to acknowledge any advantage of being white. Many participants claimed white people were now the oppressed group and that they deeply resented anything perceived to be a form of affirmative action. These responses were so predictable, so consistent and reliable, I was able to stop taking the resistance personally, get past my own conflict avoidance, and reflect on what was behind them. I began to see what I think of as the pillars of whiteness, the unexamined beliefs that prop up our racial responses. I could see the power of the belief that only bad people were racist, as well as how individualism allowed white people to exempt themselves from the forces of socialization. I could see how they were taught to think about racism only as discrete acts committed by individual people, rather than as a complex, interconnected system. And in light of so many white expressions of resentment toward people of color, I realized that we see ourselves as entitled to and deserving of more than people of color deserve. I saw our investment in a system that serves us. I also saw how hard we worked to deny all this and how defensive we became when these dynamics were named. In turn, I saw how our defensiveness maintained the racial status quo. Personal reflections on my own racism, a more critical view of media. Personal reflections on my own racism. Yeah, I know. Sometimes I'll be reading and it's like, wow, I'm reading out loud. I know. Personal reflections on my own racism, a more critical view of media and other aspects of culture, and exposure to the perspectives of many brilliant and patient mentors of color all helped me to see how these pillars of racism work. It became clear that if I believed that only bad people who intended to hurt others because of race could ever do so, I would respond with outrage to any suggestion I was involved in racism. Of course, that belief would make me feel falsely accused of something terrible. And of course, I would want to defend my character. And I had certainly had many of my own moments of responding in just those ways to reflect on. I came to see that the way we are taught to define racism makes it virtually impossible for white people to understand it. Given our racial insulation, coupled with misinformation, any suggestion that we are complicit in racism is a kind of unwelcome and insulting shock to the system. If, however, I understand racism as a system into which I was socialized, I can receive feedback on my problematic racial patterns as a helpful way to support my learning and growth. One of the greatest social fears for a white person is being told that something we have said or done is racially problematic. Yet when someone lets us know that we have done such a thing, rather than respond with gratitude and relief, After all, now that we are informed, we won't do it again, right? We often respond with anger and denial. Such moments can be experienced as something valuable, even if temporarily painful. Only after we accept that racism is unavoidable and that it is impossible to completely escape having developed problematic racial assumptions and behaviors. Such moments can be experienced as something valuable, even if temporarily painful. Only after we accept that racism is unavoidable and that it is impossible to completely escape having developed problematical racial assumptions and behaviors. None of the white people whose actions I describe in this book would identify as racist. In fact, they will most likely identify as racially progressive and vehemently deny any complicity with racism. Yet, all of their responses illustrate white fragility and how it holds racism in place. These responses spur the daily frustrations and indignities people of color endure from white people who see themselves as open-minded and thus not a racist. This book is intended for us, for white progressives who so often, despite our conscious intentions, make life so difficult for people of color. I believe that white progressives cause the most daily damage to people of color. I define a white progressive as any white person who thinks that he or she is not racist or is less racist or in the choir or already gets it. White progressives can be the most difficult for people of color because to the degree that we think we have arrived, we will put our energy into making sure that others see us as having arrived. None of our energy will go into what we need to be doing for the rest of our lives, engaging in ongoing self-awareness, continuing education, relationship building, and actual anti-racist practice. White progressives do indeed uphold and perpetrate racism, but our defensiveness and certitude make it virtually impossible to explain to us how we do so. Racism has been among the most complex social dilemmas since the founding of this country. While there is no biological race as we understand it, see Chapter 2. Race as a social construct has profound significance and shapes every aspect of our lives. No shit. Race will influence whether we will survive our birth, where we are most likely to live, which schools we will attend, who our friends and partners will be, what careers we will have, how much money we will earn, how wealthy we will be, and even how long we can expect to live. This book does not attempt to provide the solution to racism, nor does it attempt to prove that racism exists. I start from that premise. My goal is to make visible how one aspect of white sensibility continues to hold racism in place: white fragility. I will explain the phenomenon of white fragility, how we develop it, how it protects racial inequality, and what we might do about it. Whoa, so white folks got the answer. White folks have had answers. People have tried to tell them, where's my water? People have tried to tell them and heal them, give them a rap, a solution. Yeah, they ain't never want to take it. They the ones ain't never want to take it. Yeah, but it's too late for that anyway. Yeah. It is too late for this right here anyway. All we can do is just learn to coexist together, two Americans. Yeah, let me pour me some spring water. Because, wow. Now we're at chapter 1. The challenges of talking to white people about racism. We don't see ourselves in racial terms. We don't see ourselves in racial terms. I am a white American raised in the United States. I have a white frame of reference and a white world view, and I move through the world with a white experience. My experience is not a universal human experience. It is a particularly white experience in a society in which race matters profoundly, a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race. However, like most white people raised in the U.S., I was not taught to see myself in racial terms, and certainly not to draw attention to my race or to behave as if it mattered in any way. I was not taught to see myself in racial terms, and certainly not to draw attention to my race or to behave as if it mattered in any way. Of course, I was made aware that somebody's race mattered, and if race was discussed, it would be theirs, not mine. Yet a critical component of cross-racial skill building is the ability to sit with the discomfort of being seen racially, of having to proceed as if our race matters, which it does. Being seen racially is a common trigger of white fragility, and thus, to build our stamina, white people must face the first challenge, naming our race. Our opinions are uninformed. I have never met a white person without an opinion on race, on racism. It's not really possible. Oh shit. I have never met a white person without an opinion on race. It's not really possible to grow up in the United States or spend any significant time here or any other culture with a history of Western colonization without developing opinions on racism. And white people's opinion on racism tend to be strong, yet race relations are profoundly complex. We must be willing to consider that unless we have devoted intentional and ongoing study, our opinions are necessarily uninformed, even ignorant. How can I say that if you are white, your opinions on racism are most likely ignorant when I don't even know you? I can say so because nothing in mainstream U.S. culture gives us the information we need to have the nuisance understanding of arguably the most complex and enduring social dynamic of the last several hundred years. For example, I could be seen as qualified to lead a major or minor organization in this country with no understanding whatsoever of the perspectives or experiences of people of color, few, if any, relationships with people of color, and virtually no ability to engage critically with the topic of race. I can get through graduate school without ever discussing racism. I could graduate from law school without ever discussing racism. I could get through a teacher education program without ever discussing racism. If I am in a program considered progressive, I might have a single required diversity course. A handful of faculty would have fought for years to get me this course, likely having had to overcome resistance from the majority of their white colleagues, and would still be fighting to keep the course. In this diversity course, we might read ethnic authors and learn about heroes and heroines from various groups of color, but there's no guarantee we'll discuss racism. In fact, when we try to talk openly and honestly about race, white fragility quickly emerges as we are so often met with silence, defensiveness, argumentation, certitude, and other forms of pushback. These are not natural responses. They are social forces that prevent us from attaining the racial knowledge we need to engage more productively, and they function powerfully to hold the racial hierarchy in place. These forces include the ideologies of individualism and meritocracy, narrow and repetitive media representations of people of color, segregation in schools and neighborhoods, depictions of whiteness as the human ideal, truncated history, jokes and warnings, taboos on openly talking about race and white solidarity. Interrupting the forces of racism is ongoing lifelong work because the forces conditioning us into racist frameworks are always at play. One learning will never be finished. Yet our simplistic definition of racism as intentional acts of racial discrimination committed by immoral individuals engenders a confidence that we are not part of the problem and that our healing is thus complete. Whoa. Yet our simplistic definition of racism as intentional acts of racial discrimination committed by immoral individuals engenders a confidence that we are not part of the problem and that our learning is thus complete. The claims we offer up as evidence are implausible. I don't like I got a black friend or my husband black or something like that. For example, perhaps you hear someone say, I was taught to treat everyone the same, or people just need to be taught to respect one another. And that begins in the home. These statements tend to end the discussion and the learning that could come from sustained engagement. Furthermore, they are unconvincing to most people of color and only invalidate their experiences. Many white people simply do not understand the process of socialization, and this is our next challenge. Oh, let me throw out my camera over here. My heating oil. What was I at? Who was hiding here? Let me turn on my air for just a few minutes. Understand and doing. These statements tend to end the discussion and the learning that could come from sustained engagement. Furthermore, they are unconvincing to most people of color and only invalidate their experiences. Many white people simply do not understand the process of socialization, and this is our next challenge. We don't understand socialization. When I talk to white people about racism, their responses are so predictable, I sometimes feel as though we are all reciting lines from a shared script. And on some level, we are, because we are actors in a shared culture. A significant aspect of the white script derives from our seeing ourselves as both objective and unique. To understand white fragility, we have to begin to understand why we cannot fully be either. We must understand the forces of socialization. We make sense of perceptions and experiences through our particular cultural lens. This lens is neither universal nor objective, and without it, a person could not function in any human society. But exploring these cultural frameworks can be particularly challenging in Western culture precisely because of two key Western ideologies: individualism and objectivity. Briefly, individualism holds that we are each unique and stand apart from each other, even those within our social groups. Objectivity tells us that it is possible to be free of all bias. These ideologies make it very difficult for white people to explore the collective aspects of the white experience. Individualism is a storyline that creates, communicates, reproduces, and reinforces the concept that each of us is a unique individual and that our group memberships, such as race, class, or gender, are irrelevant to our opportunities. Individualism Individualism claims that there are no intrinsic barriers to individual success and that failure is not a consequence of social structures but comes from individual character. According to the ideology of individualism, race is irrelevant. Of course, we do occupy distinct race, gender, class, and other positions that profoundly shape our life chances in ways that are not natural, voluntary, or random. Opportunity is not equally distributed across race, class, and gender. On some level, we know that Bill Gates' son was born into a set of opportunities that will benefit him throughout his life, whether he is mediocre or exceptional. Yet, even though Gates' son has clearly been handed unearned advantage, we cling tightly to the ideology of individualism. We cling tightly to the ideology of individualism when asked to consider our own unearned advantages. Regardless of our protestations that social groups don't matter and that we see everyone as equal, we know that to be a man as defined by the dominant culture is a different experience from being a woman. We know that to be viewed as old is different from being viewed as young. Rich is different from poor. Able-bodied different from having a disability. Gay different from heterosexual, and so on and so forth. These groups matter, but they don't matter naturally, as we are often taught to believe. Rather, we are taught that they matter, and the social meaning ascribed to these groups creates a difference in lived experience. We are taught these social meanings in myriad ways by a range of people and through a variety of mediums. This training continues after childhood and throughout our lives. Much of it is nonverbal and is achieved through watching and comparing ourselves to others. We are socialized into these groups collectively. In mainstream culture, We all receive the same messages about what these groups mean. While being in one group is a different experience from being in another. And we also know that it is better to be in one of these groups than to be in its opposite. For example, to be young rather than old, able-bodied rather than have a disability, rich rather than poor. We gain our understanding of group meaning collectively through aspects of the society around us that are shared and unavoidable. TV, movies, new items, song lyrics, magazines, textbooks, schools, religion, literature, stories, jokes, traditions, and practices. Traditions and practices, history, and so on. These dimensions of our culture shape our group identities, our understanding, and they all white. They all show the white. Every last one of them, right down to religion. Your school books, your school lessons, the curriculum, literature and stuff, your stories, your jokes, everything. It's got a white view on it. It's for white benefits. Our understanding of ourselves is necessarily based on our comparisons with others. The concept of pretty has no meaning without the concept of ugly. Smart means little without the idea of not smart or stupid. And deserving has no meaning without the concept of undeserving. We come to understand who we are by understanding who we are not. But because of our society's emphasis on individuality, many of us are unskilled at reflecting on our group memberships. To understand race relations today, we must push against our conditioning and grapple with how and why racial group memberships matter. In addition to challenging our sense of ourselves as individuals, tackling group identity also challenges our belief in objectivity. If group membership is relevant, then we don't see the world from the universal human perspective, but from the perspective of a particular kind of human. In this way, both ideologies are disrupted. Thus, reflecting on our racial frames is particularly challenging for many white people because we are taught that to have a racial viewpoint is to be biased. Unfortunately, this belief protects our biases because denying that we have them ensures that we won't examine or change them. This will be important to remember when we consider our racial socialization because there's a vast difference between what we verbally tell our children and all the other ways we train them into the racial norms of our culture. For many white people, the mere title of this book will cause resistance because I am breaking a cardinal rule of individualism. I am generalizing. I am proceeding as if I could know anything about someone just because the person is white. Right now, you may be thinking of all the ways that you are different from other white people, and that if I just knew how, you come to this country, or were close to these people, or grew up in this neighborhood, endured this struggle, and had this experience, then I would know that you were different, that you was not racist. I've witnessed this common reflex countless of times in my work. For example, I recently gave a talk to a group of about 200 employees. There were no more than 5 people of color in their organization. And of these 5, only 2 were African American. Over and over, I emphasized the importance of white people having racial humility and of not exempting ourselves from the unavoidable dynamics of racism. As soon as I was done speaking, a line of white folk formed, ostensibly to ask me questions, but more importantly, to reiterate the same opinions on race they held when they had entered the room. The first in line was a white man who explained that he was Italian American and that Italians were once considered black and discriminated against. So did not think that white people experienced racism too? That he could be in that overwhelmingly white room of co-workers and exempt himself from an examination of his whiteness because Italians were once discriminated against is an all too common example of individualism. A more fruitful form of engagement, because it expands rather than protects his current worldview, would have been to consider how Italian Americans were able to become white and how that assimilation has shaped his experiences in the presence as a white man. His claims did not illustrate that he was different from other white people when it comes to race. I can predict that many readers will make similar claims of exception precisely because we are products of our culture, not separate from it. As a sociologist, I am quite comfortable generalizing. Social life is patterned and predictable in measurable ways. But I understand that my generalizations may cause some defensiveness for the white people about whom I am generalizing, given how cherished the ideology of individualism is in our culture. There are, of course, exceptions, but patterns are recognized as such precisely because they are recurring and predictable. We cannot understand modern forms of racism if we cannot or will not explore patterns of group behavior and their effects on individuals. I ask readers to make the specific adjustments they think are necessary to their situation, rather than reject the evidence entirely. For example, perhaps you grew up in poverty, or are an Ashkenazi, or are an Ashkenazi Jew, Ashkenazi Jew, or are an Ashkenazi Jew of European heritage, or were raised in a military family. Perhaps you grew up in Canada, Hawaii, or Germany, or had people of color in your family. None of these situations exempts you from the forces of racism because no aspect of society is outside of these forces. Whoa. None of these situations exempts you from the forces of racism because no aspect of society is outside of these forces. Rather than use what you see as unique about yourself as an exemption from further examination, a more fruitful approach would be to ask yourself, if I am white and I've had X experience, how did X shape me as a result of also being white? Setting aside your sense of uniqueness is a critical skill that will allow you to see the big picture of the society in which we live. Individualism will not. For now, try to let go of your individual narrative and grapple with the collective messages we all receive as members of a larger shared culture. Work to see how these messages have shaped your life, rather than use some aspect of your story to excuse yourself from their impact. We have a simplistic understanding of racism. The final challenge we need to address is our definition of racist. In the post-civil rights era, we have been taught that racists are mean people who intentionally dislike others because of their race. Racists are immoral. Therefore, if I am saying that my readers are racist, or even worse, that all white people are racist, I am saying something deeply offensive. I am questioning my readers' very moral character. How can I make this claim when I don't even know my readers? Many of you have friends and loved ones of color. So how can you be racist? In fact, since it's racist to generalize about people according to race, I am the one being racist. So let me be clear. If your definition of a racist is someone who holds conscious dislike of people because of race, then I agree that it is offensive for me to suggest that you are racist when I don't know you. I also agree that if this is your definition of racism and you are against racism, then you are not racist. Now breathe. I am not using this definition of racism, and I am not saying that you are immoral. If you can remain open as I lay out my argument, it should soon begin to make sense. In light of the challenges raised here, I expect that white readers will have moments of discomfort reading this book. This feeling may be a sign that I've managed to unsettle the racial status quo, which is my goal. The racial status quo is comfortable for white people, and we will not move forward in race relations if we remain comfortable. The key to moving forward is what we do with our discomfort. We can use it as a door out, blame the messenger and disregard the message, or we can use it as a door in by asking, why does this unsettle me? What would it mean for me if this was true? How does this lens change my understanding of racial dynamics? How can my unease help reveal the unexamined assumptions I have been making? It is possible that because I am white, is it possible that because I am white, there are some racial dynamics I can't see? Am I willing to consider that possibility? If I am not willing to do so, then why not? If you are reading this and you are still making case for why you are different from other white people and why none of this applies to you, stop and take a breath. Now return to the questions above and keep working through them. To interrupt white fragility, we need to build our capacity to sustain the discomfort of not knowing. the discomfort of being racially unmoored, the discomfort of racial humility. Our next task is to understand how the forces of racial socialization are constantly at play. The inability to acknowledge these forces inevitably leads to the resistance and defensiveness of white fragility. To increase the racial stamina that counters white fragility, we must reflect on the whole of our identities and our racial group identity in particular. For white people, this means first struggling with what it means to be white. Woo, we did it, honey. We made it to chapter 2. Racism and white supremacy. Now, this might be a good enough book. I declare. And the others that I'm gonna go back through Robert Michael Eric Dyson, the one we just finished. Here, we cannot stop and look at them books that he suggested for you white people that did come here. That one lady that came here previously, I don't even remember when, but this would be perfect for you. That sent me the message. If you ever come across this video again, this right here would be perfect for you. Get this book and read it. And like I said and stuff, let me know if you want to find somebody to debate you and stuff, because that was really rude and disrespectful. Oh, she's doing a study on Black America. The lady that sent me the email and stuff, I just happened to go check my emails over there and stuff, and it was there. And she was like, she's doing a study on Black America and stuff, and I just helped her case with my rambling on and, about the ancestors and some unknown power and force and all this and that. And I told her, tell somebody who gives a damn, because I don't. But I do digress to tell her that she need to read this right here, and she need to learn and stuff, how learn to get you some therapy too. All of y'all white people do. This part right here for y'all. Yeah. And I wasn't even intending on reading nothing that can help y'all. But if it do, if Red Summer and 100 years of lynching ain't showing your ass that you need some therapy, and y'all really need to look within y'all self and see if that resides in you from your clan ancestors. But this right here seemed like, the ancestors said we're going to give them a little bit more so that they can really know what they do with it, what you do with it, white America. I don't know, and I really don't care. I'm still here for Black America to help us get our healing and stuff. But I love y'all. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. Thank you for hanging in there with me. And we got to chapter 2. We will resume this tomorrow night. And we shouldn't take long with this right here. We're going to do two chapters a night. They're fairly easy to do and stuff. And I love you. I love you to life, Black America, and afterlife. Let's just do the knowledge and stuff so we can learn what we never knew. What school didn't teach us, church didn't teach us, our parents and grandparents didn't teach us. It was just better to not discuss these things. But we need to discuss these things so we can finally be together. We can finally be together, because ain't nothing going to stop us from creating our empire again, ever again. Nothing and no one will ever get in the way of that. But honey, you need your ancestors. Black America, you need your ancestors, honey. Your ancestors gonna stop every motherfucking thing. Everybody coming in your face, honey, bring your ancestors up. Let your ancestors know. Let they ass know. This right here, my ancestors put me on this. My ancestors, tell them. As far as me, I got 3,000 of them behind me at all times. At all times, they behind me. So when you telling me that I can't do what my ancestors telling me I better do, I gotta do, oh yeah. I don't think you really know. Find yourself, Black America, and that's it. It's easy. They waiting on us. Our ancestors are waiting on us. Cosmic energy, Mother Gaia on our side, baby. All of that is activating, it's energizing off of carbonic energies. We made of carbon, baby. We, Black America, Black Africa, are made of carbon. It's one of our major ingredients, the core ingredients. Carbon, selenium, and copper, baby. So yeah, you ain't got nothing to worry about. Just detox. Drink your water, lean off that meat so much. that mother, lean off that meat so much. I know it's still hard and stuff for me and stuff. Cause here we done spent 40, 50 years eating meat. But it's not the same for one thing. Yeah, your ass be eating meat glue and all kind of stuff, and then it's got so many carcinogens and stuff in it. Now we got to go back to basic. We got to go back to basic. Ask your auntie, your great aunties, why they still here. Ask them, auntie, what am I doing with this garden? Ain't nothing growing. Everything's stunted. And let them go on and tell you what to do. Go on and ask them things that we haven't. Because if mine was still here, honey, I sure got a lot of questions that I should have been asking, like Zora Neale Hurston. We got to ask questions while we can. Because if we don't, honey, it's all going to be lost. I'm just saying, But I love y'all. Yeah, let's just get on up out of here. Yeah. Yeah, black first. When worst come to worst, mine's come first. Mine's come first.